I just want to insert my opinion for like 2 seconds on the Nolan Wells case, because I just saw where Nancy Grace came out with the transcribed CETO call. And here's my thing. I'm from the South, so I feel like I can speak on this because I grew up around nothing but racist, okay? And so as someone with this skin, I feel like I could speak out on this. Here's my questions. Why? First of all, so many of y'all want to say that it wasn't murder. Like, so many of y'all were so quick to say it wasn't murder, that things happened. If that was the case, then why do none of the friends know what happened? Furthermore, Nancy Grace just released a CETO call. Anybody in their right mind, if you hear what was on that call in the background where they're asking, is someone dead? First things first, you're not going to call CETO. You're going to call 911, typically, if you're worried about someone. Secondly, why did you turn down Coast Guard when they asked if you needed the Coast Guard? If you are sinking, and if there is that shit going on in the background, like what they're asking about, is someone dead, you should say yes to any bit of help that you can get, right? I also think it's odd that all of them got rid of their social media. None of them have really had much of an explanation. They do what your typical white people do in those circumstances. Look at the Murdoch case, and there was no one of color in that case. But because they were prominent Caucasians surrounding around that death of the girlfriend, they did everything they could to cover up and get him out of it. The same rules apply to this, and like in my head, the same rules apply to this. They were both situations were boating, and in those situations, someone unfortunately lost their life. But getting back to the Nolan case, hearing that voice, like hearing that recording of them asking for, or just asking if someone is dead in the background, how is it that you're clueless and you have no idea what could have happened to him? That call, like, there's a reason why Nancy Grace got her bob fixed to the heavens, honey. That thing wouldn't move in hurricane force winds. She knows something. Her gut tells her something, just like my gut has been telling me something has been going on with this case. It was too weird. It was too weird. And I got to be careful with how I say things, because y'all love to drag me through the mud anytime I talk out against Caucasians. So I'm trying to be careful how I word this, but before I get in the shower, I've had a long day at work. Before I get in the shower, I really wanted to like put a little bit of 2 cents in your head with that, because I commented on Nancy Grace's video and already people have started coming for me, and all I did was comment, why did we call CETO and not 911? And several people commented and said, well, because there was no medical emergency. You fucking racist idiot. What do you mean there's no medical emergency? Open your fucking ears, and do you not hear them in the background asking if someone is dead? Are you that small-minded that you will forego any bit of the facts because you need your story to be the truth, where no one was murdered? If that was your youngin', if the roles were reversed, y'all, my God, as a white person, I can come out and say that. I know good and well if the roles were reversed, y'all would be dragging this through the mud. But because it was a group of Caucasians and it was an African American person that passed away, all of you small-minded, closed, racist people, you immediately want to assume that he died of like natural causes, or he caused his own death, or it wasn't a murder. I will always stand on the right side of history. I promise you. I don't care how many people cancel me, how many people come for me. My boys will know that their mother always stood on the right side of history. I have said that there was something fishy about this case from the moment it came out in the news. And as soon as I posted something about it, y'all came for me. And I'm just here to say that I stand with Nancy. There's a reason why Nancy is as into this as she was the Casey Anthony shit. Okay? She knows because her spidey senses are tingling just like my spidey senses are tingling. If a youngin' ever went with me on a boat, it don't matter if they were black, white, brown, purple, green, blue, square, triangle, rectangle, obtuse, caboose, papatoose, you name it. That baby's coming home with me and my family. I don't care if anybody got in a fight or an altercation. If you go on the boat with me and my husband, I'm bringing you back. Scout's honor. Promise. Promise. There's something, you never leave anybody, anywhere, especially on water. Y'all can get the fuck out of here with your excuses. That's the thing about you racist people. Y'all will make an excuse out of anything to justify any type of actions. Every single time. There's always an excuse. Just as soon as something happens in the media when an African American or a brown skinned person is involved, you're quick to say, stupid is as stupid does, right? All those things. But you didn't say that about the young girl that died with the Murdochs on the boat. Everybody was boo-hooing tears about her dying. It was so tragic, right? But we don't have that same sympathy for this poor youngin' who had his whole life ahead of him. It doesn't matter what the familial situations were, because I saw that being thrown around. That doesn't matter. He went out with a group of friends. He should have came back with a group of friends, alive. And if he ever went missing, their first thing should have been, we need to find him. We need to know what's going on. How is it that we all of a sudden, everybody's got amnesia and nobody knows what happened to him and nobody can find him? Make that make sense. Those are the type of people that I don't want my children around. Y'all are so twisted. Y'all are so twisted. I cannot wait for the truth to come out about this poor baby. Just to prove to a lot of you small-minded, closed-minded, racist people, how many more people have to die for you to see that there is a common denominator here? There's a problem. I wouldn't let my own children who are Caucasian go on a boat with a group full of other Caucasian children. Let that sink in. We'll not allow it. The only time I'll allow it is if I'm there. That's it. I pray that some of y'all find a little bit of brains in between your ears. And I pray that some of y'all find a little bit of empathy too. Because all of you closed-minded, small-minded racists are also you claim to be Christians. Y'all are the most evil people I have ever seen in my entire life. Evil. Evil people. And that right there is why so many young people, and I don't even think I'm young, but I can include myself in this. There's a reason why me and my family don't go to church every Sunday, every Wednesday like I did when I grew up. Your body is your temple. Jesus is right here. Those of you that go to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and the ones that post your Bible verses or, you know, live, laugh, love, eat, pray, love, whatever, on your walls, you're the same people. You're the same people. I'm disgusted with y'all. Like, to everyone with brown skin, please let me formally apologize, because I do not share the views and the thought patterns and anything to do with what the people that share my skin color have. But I apologize for these small-minded people, because as someone who was raised around nothing but small-minded racists, I grew a brain myself and decided what I wanted to pick as right and wrong. And I'm so sorry that not all of us feel this way, but I promise you, I feel so passionately about this that I will do everything that I can in my power to never stop running my lips to help just shed light onto what y'all go through. I love you, but I had to do this. I got to get this.
Witness speaks out. Woman claims she saw Nolan Wells being attacked. What she revealed changes everything. That is where this story begins. Not with speculation, not with outrage, with a fact that no investigation, no legal proceeding, and no amount of time has been able to change. Nolan Wells left. Nolan Wells did not return, and the question of what happened to him in the hours between those two moments is still, as of July 2026, without a complete, verified, publicly confirmed answer. But something has shifted. A woman has come forward. She says she was there. She says she saw something happen to Nolan Wells on that island, and what she has described has forced investigators, attorneys, and the public to reconsider everything they thought they understood about this case. If you are watching this for the first time, stay with us. If you have been following this case since the beginning, stay with us. Because what is about to be laid out is not a reaction, it is not a rumor, it is the documented record, examined carefully, honestly, and without cutting corners. This is unrivaled true crime, and we do not move faster than the facts. Like this video if you believe Nolan Wells deserves the truth, and subscribe to this channel so you are here when the next piece of this case breaks open. Horn Island sits off the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. It is part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, managed by the National Park Service, which means it is federal land. There are no permanent structures on it, no cell towers with strong coverage, no infrastructure, no roads. You can only reach it by water. On most days it is quiet, isolated, and largely empty. On the 4th of July, it becomes something else entirely. Hundreds of boats anchor along its shores. Thousands of people gather. Groups mix, drinks flow, people ride between boats, between groups, between strangers who become temporary friends for the duration of a holiday afternoon. It is chaotic by design and by tradition. Nolan Wells arrived on that island on the morning of July 4th with a group he had known for years. The group was predominantly white. Nolan was black. That detail matters, and it will be addressed directly. But before that conversation can be had honestly, the sequence of events needs to be established clearly, because the facts themselves carry enough weight without amplification. The boat Nolan's group used that day developed mechanical trouble during the afternoon. The bilge pump failed. The battery was compromised. Water began entering the vessel. This is not disputed. It is documented and later confirmed by GPS data and a verified distress call. What happened next is where the account fractures. Instead of calling 911 or the United States Coast Guard, someone from the group called SeaTow, designated in the transcript as STO. SeaTow is a private, membership-based marine assistance company. It functions the way roadside assistance functions for vehicles, but on the water. You pay for a membership, and when your boat breaks down, you call them. The call was made. A young male voice reported the mechanical problem. West tip of Horn Island. Water rising. Pump failure. Requesting assistance. That much is documented and verified in the recording. But the foreground of that call is not what people cannot stop talking about. It is the background. Underneath the main conversation, beneath the voice calmly describing a mechanical emergency, there are other voices, other people, and one of those voices, audible in the background of the recording, appears to ask whether someone is dead. That question, captured on that call, spoken before Nolan Wells was ever reported missing, is the audio detail that has refused to go away, because it has never been explained. The recording was later released by state officials and brought to wider public attention through media coverage, including commentary from Nancy Grace, whose decades of experience in high-profile criminal cases led her to signal, clearly and without hesitation, that this case warranted serious scrutiny. When someone with that level of exposure to criminal proceedings treats a case with that level of urgency, it is worth paying attention to why. The question of why SeaTow was called instead of 911 or the Coast Guard has been raised publicly and repeatedly. The response from those who defend the group's decisions is that SeaTow is a standard choice for a mechanical breakdown on the water, that there was no medical emergency at that point, that the Coast Guard was not needed yet. That is a version of events that exists on the record. But here is the part that has not been resolved. If the boat was sinking, if the situation was deteriorating, if the background of the call captures a voice asking whether someone is already dead, then the word yet becomes the most loaded word in that entire defense. Because if something had already happened, if someone had already been hurt, then the decision to call a private towing service instead of emergency services was not a practical choice, it was a consequential one. Whether the Coast Guard was actively offered assistance and actively declined during that afternoon call has not been confirmed in any released official documentation. That is important to acknowledge. It does not mean it did not happen, it means the public record has not confirmed it yet. And in a case with this many moving parts, the difference between unconfirmed and false is not a small one. The friend's account of what happened has remained consistent across multiple interviews and public statements. They say the mechanical problem was addressed. A nearby boat offered a tow. Sea Tow confirmed the membership. The vessel was assisted, and at some point during that afternoon, they say Nolan chose to stay behind. According to their version of events, Nolan had met a girl on the island. He wanted to catch a later ride home with another group. They say this kind of arrangement was common at Horn Island on the 4th of July, that people switched boats and groups throughout the day as a matter of routine. They say they believed he had found another way back to the mainland, so they left. They say it was not until approximately 11 o'clock that night that one of them contacted the Coast Guard once it became clear that Nolan had not returned home and could not be reached by phone. That is their account. It has been stated consistently. But consistency is not the same as completeness. And the gaps in that timeline are precisely where the most urgent questions live. Two people who knew Nolan Wells better than almost anyone said, independently of each other, that what the friends described does not match who Nolan was. Javon Williams had known Nolan for years. He was on Horn Island that day, on a different boat, with a different group. He confirmed that he saw Nolan on the island. But he also said something that landed heavily and has stayed in the public conversation ever since. He said he had never known Nolan to stay behind while his friends left. He said that if Nolan rode out to the island with you, he came back with you. That was not a casual observation. That was a character assessment built on years of knowing the same person across many different situations. Nolan's father said the same thing. Not in coordination with Javon Williams, separately, arriving at the same conclusion through a different path. A father who knew his son, a friend who knew him from outside the family, both of them expressing the same doubt about the same central claim. That is not proof that anything criminal occurred. But it is a pattern of testimony that does not dissolve under scrutiny. There is also a documented gap in the departure timeline, approximately 30 minutes, that has never been fully and publicly explained. What was happening during that window? When exactly did the group leave? When was Nolan last confirmed to be in the presence of that group versus alone on the island? These questions are not rhetorical. They are the questions that the phone data, once fully analyzed, should be able to answer. Both sides agreed to a mutual phone inspection. Simultaneous access, neither party gaining information before the other. That agreement matters because phone data is the category of evidence least susceptible to human revision. GPS timestamps record physical location. Message threads preserve the exact words sent and received. Call logs document every communication and its timing. Deleted content can often be forensically recovered. The FBI, which has jurisdiction over this case because Horn Island is federal land, has the tools and the authority to extract a digital timeline that no one on that boat can alter after the fact. As of July 2026, the phone data analysis had not been fully released publicly. The investigation remains active. In the days following Nolan's death, every member of the friend group removed or deactivated their social media accounts. All of them. No posts, no statements, no public explanations offered at the time. Their legal teams later argued that this was a protective response, that threats were already being directed at them online, that the internet had already begun targeting them before any formal investigation had drawn conclusions. That part is documented. The threats were real. The online pressure was real. But to the people watching from the outside, to Nolan's family, to his community, and to anyone paying attention to the sequence of events, the collective silence landed as something else entirely. The perception of guilt, whether accurate or not, became an accelerant. It poured into an already volatile public reaction and turned the temperature of the conversation into something that made it harder, not easier, to find the truth. Two pieces of evidence went viral during the peak of public outrage about this case. Both of them were presented online as proof of a cover-up. Both of them were subsequently addressed on the record. This needs to be stated plainly, because how those corrections are understood matters significantly to the integrity of the larger conversation. The first piece of viral evidence was a video. It appeared to show a heated confrontation involving a phone. People across social media platforms identified the voice as belonging to one of the friends on the boat and claimed the video was connected to Nolan, to that day, to that island. It spread widely, hundreds of thousands of views. It was treated by enormous numbers of people as documentation of something that had occurred on or around July 4th. Traston Shepard, one of the friends who was on the boat that day, spoke publicly and on the record. He identified the voice in that video as his own. He also identified the confrontation as a completely separate incident, unrelated to Nolan Wells, unrelated to Horn Island, unrelated to that day in any way. That is not a minor adjustment to a detail. That is the entire foundational claim of the viral video collapsing. The video was not evidence of what people said it was evidence of. The second piece of viral evidence was a photograph. It circulated with the claim that it showed Nolan alive on the island after the time the friends said they left, implying that someone had seen him later and that information was being suppressed. The implication was unmistakable. Someone was hiding the truth about when Nolan was last seen. Metadata analysis of that photograph showed it was taken more than a week before July 4th. The timeline attached to it was not accurate. The claim built on that timeline was not accurate. Both of those corrections are significant. And this is the part that requires careful thinking, because it cuts in two directions simultaneously. The debunking of those two viral claims matters. It matters for the truth. It matters for the people whose names and lives were attached to content that was factually wrong. Traston Shepard spoke publicly to correct the argument video claim and faced serious personal consequences for doing so. Bart Edmonston Jr., whose documented role on the day in question involved helping tow a disabled vessel, required legal intervention in response to accusations that had no supporting evidence. These are young people. Some of them were teenagers. Their lives have been permanently reshaped by content that moved faster than the facts beneath it. But here is the other direction that correction cuts. Debunking the viral evidence does not close the case. It does not answer the question of what the background voice on the sea tow call was responding to. It does not explain the 30-minute gap. It does not reconcile the friend's account with the character testimony from Javon Williams and Nolan's father. It does not explain the observations noted during forensic examination of Nolan's body. Removing false evidence from a case does not automatically make the remaining evidence disappear. It makes it more important to look at the evidence that holds up. The independent forensic examination of Nolan's body was completed. The findings were cause of death, undetermined; manner of death, undetermined. In forensic pathology, undetermined does not mean accidental. It does not mean natural. It does not mean there is nothing there. It means the available evidence was insufficient to support a firm conclusion, and in Nolan's case, that insufficiency was compounded by the fact that certain material was not available to the independent examiner during the second review. One specific detail in the independent examination has never been publicly resolved. Observations at the back of Nolan's head were noted and listed as pending further investigation. That phrase, pending further investigation, attached to a physical observation on a deceased 18-year-old, is not a minor notation. It is an open question attached to a closed door that has not yet been unlocked for the public. The complete state toxicology report was finished. It was sealed, not for concealment, but for grand jury review, which is the standard legal procedure in Jackson County, Mississippi, for deaths that are classified as unnatural or suspicious. Under Mississippi law, the family is entitled to receive certain reports within a defined legal window. Communication in the case was reassigned to a victim advocate, a designation that carries procedural weight and signals how the state has categorized the nature of this death. A grand jury referral was planned, once the Jackson County Sheriff's investigation reached the appropriate stage. This is important to understand in context. A grand jury referral in this jurisdiction for this type of death is standard procedure. It is not itself confirmation that charges are imminent. Grand jury proceedings are private. The family's attorneys are not present. The outcome could involve charges directly related to how Nolan died, or it could involve charges related to evidence handling, or statements made during the investigation, or it could result in a finding that the available evidence does not support an indictment. None of those outcomes had been publicly determined as of the latest confirmed reporting. 60 witnesses had been interviewed. The FBI, operating under federal jurisdiction due to Horn Island's status as National Park Service land, remained actively engaged in the digital evidence phase of the investigation. The investigation was not dormant, it was moving, just not at the speed that public outrage was demanding. Attorney Ben Crump became involved in this case on behalf of Nolan's family. His presence in a case carries a specific and documented history. He has represented families in some of the most significant civil rights legal battles in recent American history. His involvement here was not accidental or arbitrary. He raised a specific concern, grounded in documented patterns across decades of American criminal justice, about whether cases involving black victims received the same investigative urgency, the same prosecutorial commitment, and the same public institutional attention as cases involving white victims. That concern is not a feeling. It is supported by data, by legal history, and by case precedent. It does not require this specific case to fit a predetermined template in order for the larger systemic concern to be legitimate. The question of whether Nolan's case received the scrutiny it deserved from the moment his body was found is a question worth asking, with seriousness and without dismissal. The comparison to the Alex Murdaugh case in South Carolina has been raised by multiple commentators, including those who have followed both cases closely. The parallel points are specific. A prominent, connected group of young people, a death on the water, a community initially inclined toward deference, and an institutional response that moved slowly until it could no longer avoid accountability. In the Murdaugh case, it took years of that protected environment before the full scope of what had occurred became impossible to suppress. Phone records and forensic evidence eventually unraveled something far larger than anyone had publicly acknowledged. The people who sensed that something was wrong before the proof emerged were not wrong to sense it. And then the witness came forward. A woman came forward and stated that she was present in the vicinity of Horn Island on July 4th, 2025. She stated that she witnessed Nolan Wells being physically attacked. Her account, if corroborated, represents the most consequential single piece of testimony to emerge in this case since the release of the CETO recording. The significance of what she has described cannot be overstated in terms of how it repositions every other piece of information in the timeline. If a person was present on or near that island on that day and witnessed a physical assault on Nolan Wells, then the friend's account that he simply chose to stay behind is not a different version of events. It is a contradicted version of events. It repositions the background voice on the CETO call. If an attack had already occurred, if someone in that group already knew what had happened, then the voice asking whether someone is dead is not confusion. It is awareness. It is someone acknowledging in the background of a call to a private towing company that a person may already be dead. It repositions the 30-minute timeline gap. If an altercation occurred during that window, if something happened between the group and Nolan before the group departed, then the gap is not an unexplained scheduling inconsistency. It is time that was filled by something specific that has not been publicly disclosed. It repositions the observations at the back of Nolan's head, noted in the independent forensic examination. Physical observations consistent with impact to the back of the head align more closely with an assault than with an accidental drowning in calm waters. That alignment is not a conclusion. It is a question that the forensic record, once fully released, will have to address directly. And it repositions the character testimony from Javon Williams and Nolan's father. Both of them said Nolan would never have voluntarily stayed behind while his friends left. If the witness's account is accurate, then he did not stay behind voluntarily. He was left behind for a reason that had nothing to do with meeting a girl or catching a different ride. For the witness's account to carry evidentiary weight, it will require corroboration. Her presence on or near the island on that specific day will need to be independently verifiable, through boat records, through other witnesses, through phone data or GPS that places her in that location during the relevant window. Her description of what she saw will need to be consistent with the forensic record. Her account will need to hold up across multiple tellings, under direct questioning, and against the digital timeline being assembled from the phone inspection. If she passes those tests, she is not simply a person who saw something troubling on a holiday afternoon. She is potentially the witness who closes the largest gap in this entire case. The investigation is still active. The sealed toxicology report has not been released. The phone data has not been publicly disclosed. The grand jury has not convened. The FBI continues working the digital evidence. None of the final answers are in yet, but the framework within which those answers will be evaluated has changed because of what this woman says she saw. There is a version of this case that the public has been arguing about since the summer of 2025, and it is built on viral content, on emotional reactions, on racial tension that is real and historically grounded, and on two pieces of evidence that were subsequently shown to be inaccurate. That version has done significant damage, both to the pursuit of truth and to the lives of real people whose involvement in this case has been misrepresented in ways that cannot be fully undone. And then there is the case itself, the documented record, the CTO call with its unresolved background audio, the 30-minute departure gap, the undetermined cause and manner of death, the observations at the back of Nolan's head that remain pending further investigation, the character testimony from two people who knew him separately and arrived at the same conclusion, the sealed toxicology held for a grand jury, 60 witnesses interviewed by law enforcement, the FBI actively processing digital evidence from the phones of everyone involved, and now, a woman who says she was there and saw what actually happened to Nolan Wells on that island. These are not the same case. The viral version and the documented record are not the same story. And one of the most important things that can happen right now, for Nolan, for his family, and for any honest accounting of what occurred, is for the documented record to be taken seriously on its own terms, without the distortion of content that was never accurate to begin with. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. The night before he went to Horn Island, he cooked dinner for his parents. He sat with them. He was present. He was alive and young and standing at the beginning of everything he had worked toward. College football was ahead of him. A future was ahead of him. People who loved him were surrounding him. He left the next morning with people he trusted, crossed the water to an island he had no reason to fear, and he did not come home. His body was found 2 days later. The cause of his death is officially undetermined. The manner of his death is officially undetermined. The observations noted during his forensic examination have not been resolved. The audio captured in the background of a distress call made before he was ever reported missing has not been explained. The gap in the departure timeline has not been closed. And a woman who claims she saw what happened to him on that island has now placed her account into the record. His family is not waiting for a viral moment. They are not waiting for a social media cycle to generate enough noise to force a response. They are waiting for a complete answer, built on evidence, confirmed through a legal process, and honest about everything that is still unknown. That is what they have been waiting for since July 2026. That is what Nolan Wells deserves. When the sealed toxicology report is released, unrivaled true crime will be here breaking it down. When the phone data results are disclosed, we will be here. When the grand jury moves, when the investigation reaches its next documented turning point, when the next piece of this case becomes part of the public record, this channel will cover it the same way this story was covered today. Evidence first, facts only, no assumptions, no content that moves faster than what can be confirmed. Nolan Wells deserves the truth. His family deserves the truth, and the truth is still coming. Make sure you are here when it arrives. Subscribe to Unrivaled True Crime right now and turn on every notification, because this case is not finished, and neither are we.